Hey everybody, BTO Pro here, and as some of you might know, I'm a little sarcastic. Occasionally. Well, I like using semantic HTML, and wouldn't you know, when you search for sarcasm in HTML, nothing comes up. So this is a little fun thing did on a Friday as a proof of concept demonstrating the way that a vanilla web component can interface with a couple different cool approaches. Simultaneously, I just was sad this didn't exist. So first I Googled sarcasm HTML and nothing came up, and I was devastated. There's sarcasm. Then I kept searching, and I saw some people use this convention with this fake HTML tag, which then caught on a little bit. And then you can also find a kind of joke buried in the Whatawug, in which if you search for sarcasm, right, there's a thing that says it would be inappropriate to use Q elements for marking up sarcastic statements, because it's not a quote. And then an end tag whose tag name is sarcasm. Take a deep breath, then act as described. So it's nice. I like this little Easter egg. So what we're going for here, and I've already done it, we can skip ahead and say there's a tag called MoAr SaRcAsM, is kind of going for this approach as far as the way that something's written, right? So this kind of, well, knowing this is sarcastic because of these alternating characters, so that you read it, and this is a popular, SpongeBob meme when you're making fun of something. So I want an element that does that, and I thought it was an interesting technique as far as the way that I went about doing that. So I said, okay, well, first of all, I can use nth of type. If I have the appropriate CSS selector, I could just say uppercase, lowercase, uppercase, lowercase. So then I need to be able to actually select the text. Now I can't just snag individual letters and say, hey, nth character, right? It doesn't work that way. So I need to come up with a solution that basically monitors what's being inserted into the tag. And I point to this Stack Overflow because this is someone asking, hey, how can I go about doing a mutation observer when text changes? So basically, I'm going to need to notice that the text has changed, rebuild something that appears the same as what the text was, but wrap it in tags so that every other character I can do that silly effect to. So let's see how I did it. Get me off screen. Ugh. So the way that you end up using this tag is you'd write MoAr SaRcAsM after you do your npm install at LRN web components /MoAr SaRcAsM tag. So I'm going to make it run. It says in our mono repo. So I can go to MoAr SaRcAsM, and I'm going to do yarn start. So I'm going to zoom in a bit, but the way that MoAr SaRcAsM works is it takes that text that's in there, and then it's going to do that silly effect to it, right? So it makes it nearly unreadable in some of these scenarios as I have it currently. But let's say that you wanted to, you saw a critique that said web components always have dependencies. So then what you would do naturally is make a sarcasm tag that doesn't have dependencies and say web components always have dependencies, like that. Now I can't make it announce it yet, but it satisfies what we need. So how do we make this do this? Because this is kind of a fun, silly example. So any text you put in there, it's going to do that too, right? So I'll copy and paste this, and we'll show any text can do this regardless of capitalization. Terrible word. Okay, save. This will reload, and you can see, even though I had some of that completely capitalized in the original, it's going to make sure that it's the way that it wants to do it, so that we're super trolling. All right, so how does the MoAr SaRcAsM tag work? So it has 0 dependencies. I know, it's very tricky. But it's going to extend HTML element, right? We've got MoAr SaRcAsM as our class. It's going to do custom elements.define, and we're going to pass it the class, right? So this is the way that the browser knows about this class and how to handle the tag. This is a convention our team likes to use. I just have the tag in here. You don't need to do that. You could write it in the definition below, but I like to include it. So in our constructor, which is establishing the initial way that this works, right, some defaults and things, I've got a couple attributes, really only two that matter. So I've got alley, which in this case is short for accessibility. But so I've got just the textual thing. The following is sarcastic. Now, one reason that I'm doing this is from an accessibility perspective, you wouldn't be able to tell a screen reader semantically, by the way, read the next thing as if it's not intentional. And so because we're doing this markup style to make it look a certain way, we need to make sure that we have something semantically indicating to screen readers and non-sighted users that, hey, I don't actually mean this next thing. So we've got a little phrase that says the following is sarcastic. Then we're going to make a template element, which is part of the web components spec. I'm going to attach a shadow root, and then we're going to call an initial render function. Now, the render function in question is down here. I'll get to that in a second. But the interesting, or what I thought was an interesting piece of this is I set a mutation observer, and then anytime that character data changes or the subtree, right? So we're monitoring the subtree for character data. Anytime that manipulation happens, we're going to get a change notification. And then whenever we do that change notification, I'm going to do, well, this.say is equal to this.innerText. So this is also going to strip out your HTML. There's no ability to do injection, right? Because just inner text is going to automatically do that in the browser. So, all right, I've got my render function. We'll look at that in a second. On connected callback, this is to help account for shady CSS for older platform support if it's polyfilled. But just to tee things off, I say, hey, this.say equals this.innerText. So we're on the same page that it's there. Then I have a render function, and the very basic render function here nullifies the shadow root's inner HTML, then takes the template element and sets its inner HTML to what was returned in the HTML function above, which we'll go through in a second. Then it prepares the template, again, if shady CSS or a polyfill is available. And then we append to the shadow root, which we've just cleared out, a clone of the template in question, which would be the rendered content above. So if we look at the rendered content above, we have a get HTML. It's going to add in a style. I'm going to treat this like it's a span or just an inline tag, right? Because you would write it in the context of other things. So it acts a bit more like a span. And it's inline block. Then, and I'm going to change this so you can see, I didn't actually like having bold on it. But so I'm going to say the span, and now let's think of this as this, this CSS only applies to the shadow root. So this is just the shadow content. And by shadow, I mean this, really. So any of this material is going to actually just be applied stylistically to this block. So I'm going to save, and we can see now the bold is off. So then I've applied that CSS technique with, I have a class called .letter, and we say every nth child on just the odd ones, make it uppercase. Then on just the even ones, make it lowercase. And this is another important consideration aspect. This is the accessibility aspect of this. So I have an area, and this is where we're going to actually generate our sarcastic text. This is how we're going to do the every other character, right? So imagine that's there. However, we are going to actually still present technically on the screen what the original statement was. So no matter how you wrote it, and that's how you get to use a slot tag. So anything that goes inside of this web component, imagine that it's rendered there. So right there is going to be, in this case, HTML is so easy. So the trick we're doing from an accessibility standpoint here, and I'd love to get feedback on this. There's probably other ways to do this. I'm saying, okay, well, the sarcastically rendered text, we're going to do area hidden. And that way the screen reader is going to skip that. It's not going to read, in this case, HTML is so easy, because a sighted user is going to look at it and go, oh, they're being trolly. But the screen reader is going to hit this one. It's going to print our alley statement saying the following is accessible. And then it's going to place that text of the HTML is so easy, right? So the screen reader would hear the following is sarcastic. HTML is so easy. But a sighted user is going to actually see our alternating text. So how do we do the alternating text thing is the last piece of this. We have a process text function. So the process text function is going to take input. It's going to query the shadow root for .sarcastic, right? So that means anywhere that I have class equals sarcastic, which is just that one, but just in case it would show up more than once. So we've got that one selector for sarcastic. Set the inner HTML to nothing. Then we're going to loop through the text, right, which is our inner text of our element, because the mutation observer is going to update the .text attribute to be this, which is going to run this function. So for each of those characters, I'm going to create a span. Then I'm going to do a preg match, and I'm going to see for the character at position, 0, is it a letter? And this way, we don't accidentally wrap a whole bunch of things in spans that would be something more like HTML. It's so easy. And that way, we don't end up getting a span around that character or the white space or these, right? And so now, let's say that we did have a character, right? It was the letter H. We're going to add a class to a span called letter, and then the inner text of that tag, we're going to make the letter H. If it's not a letter, right, it's a space or anything else, a non-letter character, we're just going to make a text node out of that content. Then we're going to append it into the sarcastic area. So, and we can see if I inspect on any one of these, we'll scroll that over, we can see, for example, the MoAr SaRcAsM tag here has any text can do this regardless of capitalization, right? And then I open the shadow root, we can see our styles, we can see the slot and see that it says the following is sarcastic, which is going to reveal and render any text can do this regardless of capitalization. However, visually what we see is this sarcastic span, which is area hidden for the screen reader. And then every letter has a span wrapping it so that we can do our CSS appropriately. It's a little absurd, I know, but it's fun. So then let's watch that mutation observer in action. So I can go in here and say things and stuff. And instantly, right, it wipes out what was inside of the sarcastic tag and then rebuilds because it noticed that the mutation observer fired that the inner text changed in some way. So how do we get that reactivity with that information beyond the mutation observer? Well, we have a thing called observed attributes. So I've got two attributes I'm observing, and then I have getters and setters for them. So I'm going to have say, and then I'm going to have alley. So alley is the alley statement to indicate that this is being said in our sarcastic manner. Yes, I have it defaulted to English, but because you can override that phrase, you could actually use this tag and do it in a multilingual approach. So I'm going to set say to whatever the attribute is, right? So we're going to say, hey, set the attribute. Whenever someone does this dot say equals, we're going to set the attribute say to that value. So this allows, and same for alley, and then get, well, just give me the attribute, same for that. This little section is what allows you to have properties and attributes be in alignment. It's very verbose. It's one of the things people are a little more annoyed about with this whole, use the platform approach. But it gets the job done, and you can use then properties and attributes that you don't want to be mirrored together for whatever reason. So then the last piece of this is because I've said observed attributes, right? So we're going to notice these things for changes. So whenever something says set and this runs, this is going to say, oh, I care about say as an attribute. And that is going to generate an attribute changed callback, or it's going to generate a record that calls this function. This is a core piece of how vanilla web components operate. And so I'm going to get an attribute, an old value, and a new value. So in this case, I'm going to say, let's make sure there's a new value. Let's make sure it's not set to null or something. And then we're going to do a switch statement on the attribute and say, well, if it's Ali, we're going to re-render, because that means they changed the text for what the screen reader should hear. If it's say, which is the phrase to actually do the silly thing to, then we're going to run this.processText with the new value. So connecting the whole loop together here. So the element sets itself up. There's a mutation observer. Anytime there's a change to character data in that subtree, right, which is, you could see it reflected before when I typed, it's going to set this.say to this.innerText, which helps with sanitization. That means that say changed, right? And that gets set appropriately because I have a setter for say. So it's going to say, okay, take the property, set the attribute. The attribute's observed, generates a change record, which calls this, which then we're going to have this case met. So process text with this new value is going to run. Process text is going to take the text that's inside of our web component. It's going to clear out the shadow root, rebuild in the appropriate way, and then it's going to let us troll people at scale, which is the most important piece of all. So I hope this was informative and silly. I had like an awesome explosion thing for a while, so I needed an updated example. Plus, this is vanilla, and I know there's a lot of people that don't like having dependencies with these little snippets of things. So if you want to use sarcasm like a boss, like you need more sarcasm in your life, you can go to NPM and you can snag the @LRN Web Components /MoAr SaRcAsM tag. I really hope you don't use it. All right. Catch you later.